Meanwhile, national politics is being turned into tribal entertainment. People are encouraged to fiercely identify with their team, red or blue, and see the other side as the enemy. This polarization is deliberately exploited because it keeps people fighting amongst themselves, instead of realizing that both parties essentially serve the same corporate interests. Here's something that should unite everyone but is used to divide. Infrastructure is crumbling. Bridges, roads, water systems, power grids, everything is aging and not being properly maintained. Flint, Michigan is just the most famous example of a water crisis. But there are hundreds of communities with similar problems. But instead of massive investment in public infrastructure, there is a constant push for privatization, which inevitably means higher costs and worse service. So what can you do? First, recognize that you are not alone, and your problems are not personal failings. Second, build community. Real connections with real people are your best defense against isolation and manipulation. Third, support independent media, investigative journalism, content creators who do real research. Fourth, vote, but not just in presidential elections. Local elections often have a more direct impact on your life. Fifth, consider direct action. Organize, protest, strike, support unions, boycott exploitative corporations. Real change rarely comes from the top. It comes from the bottom, from ordinary people demanding better. The truth is, the system counts on your apathy, your exhaustion, your sense of powerlessness, because when people feel powerless, they don't act. But history repeatedly shows that change is possible when enough people wake up and decide they've had enough. Labor rights, civil rights, women's rights, all were won through struggle. What's happening in the U.S. is a silent battle for the future of society. On one side, forces that want to consolidate power and wealth indefinitely. On the other, ordinary people who want dignity, security, and opportunity. The outcome is not predetermined. It depends on people waking up to reality, rejecting fabricated narratives, and acting collectively. The choice is yours. Here's the reality. The American political system no longer works for the average citizen. Academic studies, including a famous one from Princeton, have demonstrated that the political preferences of the average American have essentially zero impact on the policies passed. Zero. Meanwhile, the preferences of the rich and powerful correlate strongly with the policies implemented. This is not democracy. It's oligarchy with democratic features. So what's really happening? We are witnessing a massive consolidation of power and wealth in the hands of a very small elite, while most people see their prospects diminish. And this is no accident. It's systemic design. The education system is another battleground. Education in the U.S. is increasingly stratified. Schools in wealthy neighborhoods have excellent resources. Schools in poor neighborhoods can barely afford qualified teachers. This ensures that wealthy children have enormous advantages, perpetuating inequality across generations. Meritocracy? It's increasingly a myth. Universities have become businesses. Administrators earn CEO salaries. Costs have exploded. Students are massively indebted to obtain degrees that no longer guarantee well-paying jobs. And this student debt, more than $1.7 trillion, cannot be eliminated even through bankruptcy. It is a modern form of debt bondage. But there's more. What is taught is also controlled. Curricula are politicized. History is sanitized. Genuine critical thinking is discouraged. The goal is not to create thoughtful and engaged citizens. It is to create obedient workers and conformist consumers. People educated enough to operate the systems, but not enough to question them. Let's talk about work. The official narrative is that the economy is strong, unemployment is low, but these numbers mask the reality. Many jobs created are precarious, poorly paid, without benefits. The gig economy has transformed workers into independent contractors without labor protections. Amazon, Uber, DoorDash, these companies profit billions while their workers barely survive. Unions, which historically balanced power between labor and capital, have been systematically weakened through decades of anti-union propaganda, hostile legislation, and aggressive corporate tactics. Now, less than 11% of American workers are unionized. one of the lowest rates in the developed world. Coincidentally, this correlates perfectly with wage stagnation and increasing inequality. Automation and artificial intelligence will accelerate these trends. Millions of jobs will be eliminated. But instead of an honest discussion about how to ensure that the benefits of technology are shared, the narrative is that everyone needs to adapt and learn to code. This is absurd. There are not enough high-skilled jobs for everyone, and there never will be. Here's an uncomfortable truth. The current system requires a class of vulnerable and desperate people. People willing to accept low wages, poor conditions, without complaint. Irregular immigration is not tolerated despite the laws. It is tolerated because of the economic benefit to employers who exploit these workers. It is a feature of the system, not a bug. Now about mental health. The United States is facing simultaneous epidemics of depression, anxiety, suicide, and substance abuse. Why? Because living in a deeply unequal society, where you constantly work but never progress, where the future seems bleak, where community has been replaced by atomized individualism, this makes people sick. But instead of addressing systemic causes, the solution offered is pharmaceutical. Antidepressants are prescribed at record levels. The pharmaceutical industry profits while the underlying causes remain untouched. It's treating symptoms while ignoring the disease. And it works perfectly to keep people functional enough to work, but not engaged enough to demand real change. Opioids are another shocking example. Pharmaceutical companies deliberately created an epidemic of addiction through aggressive marketing and lies about addiction. Hundreds of thousands died. And when were they finally held accountable? They paid fines. Huge, yes, but still lucrative compared to the billions they earned. Executives weren't arrested. The system protected them. Let's talk about something fundamental. Local democracy is dying. Local newspapers are closing. Coverage of local politics is minimal. Most people don't know who their local representatives are or what they do. This allows corruption to flourish at the local level, where decisions that directly affect their lives are made away from the spotlight. Now let's delve into something that is fundamentally transforming American society: mass surveillance. Edward Snowden revealed more than a decade ago that the U.S. government was massively collecting data from its citizens. There was temporary outrage, some debates in Congress, and then nothing really changed. In fact, it got worse. Your phone tracks your every move. Your apps sell your data. Your smart TVs listen to your conversations. Your virtual assistants record everything. Cameras with facial recognition are scattered throughout cities. And all of this is legal. Private companies collect this information, then sell or share it with the government, completely circumventing constitutional protections against illegal searches. But surveillance is only one part of the equation. There is also control through financial technology. Every transaction you make leaves a digital trail. Banks know exactly how you spend your money. And with the development of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, this control could become absolute. Imagine a world where the government can shut down your ability to buy or sell with the push of a button. Sounds like science fiction? It's already happening in other countries. China has its social credit system, where people's behavior determines their access to services. Canada froze the bank accounts of protesters during the truckers' protests. This sets dangerous precedents. And with the financial surveillance and control infrastructure already in place in the U.S., the tools for similar implementation are already in place. All that's missing is the political will. Let's talk about something that affects your food, your health, and your future: industrial agriculture and the food system. Large agrochemical corporations control the seeds. Giant processors control meat production. Supermarket chains control distribution. Independent family farms are rapidly disappearing. In their place, massive industrial operations prioritize profit over quality, sustainability, or health. Ultra-processed foods dominate the American diet. They are designed to be addictive, cheap to produce, and have enormous profit margins. The consequences? Epidemics of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. But these companies spend millions on lobbying to ensure that regulations remain weak and that their products continue to be promoted. Here is something that will shock you. Studies show that the nutritional value of food has consistently declined over the past few decades. An apple today has significantly fewer vitamins and minerals than an apple from 1950. Why? Depleted soils, industrial farming practices, varieties developed for appearance and durability rather than nutrition. You are eating more, but nourishing yourself less, and we cannot ignore the environmental issues that are being deliberately downplayed. While there are heated debates about climate change, more immediate issues are ignored. Pollution of drinking water with perennial chemicals, PFAS, microplastics found in every human organ tested, massive decline of pollinating insects, destruction of crucial ecosystems. These are not distant threats. They are affecting you now. Corporations pollute with impunity, pay paltry fines when caught, and continue to operate. The EPA, which is supposed to protect the environment, is often captured by the interests of the industries it is supposed to regulate. Former corporate executives run regulatory agencies, then return to the private sector. The classic revolving door that ensures regulations favor corporate profits over public health. Now let's address something extremely controversial but crucial: the military-industrial complex. The United States spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. The military budget is larger than health, education, infrastructure, and almost everything else combined. Where does all this money go? Some of it goes to troop and veteran salaries, although veterans often complain of inadequate care. But most of it goes to private contractors, weapons manufacturers, and technology companies. These corporations profit immensely from ongoing conflict. There is a direct financial incentive to keep the U.S. in a state of perpetual war. And if you look at recent history, that's exactly what has been happening. Wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. Conflicts that lasted decades, cost trillions, killed hundreds of thousands, and whose results are questionable at best. But Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and others profited billions. These contractors have powerful lobbies, make massive political donations, and ensure the money keeps flowing. Have you ever stopped to think about what's really happening behind the scenes in the world's largest economy? While the mainstream media repeats the same narratives, a silent transformation is taking place in the United States that few are openly discussing. And no, this isn't conspiracy theory. These are concrete facts that are being deliberately kept off your radar. Let's start with the financial system. While you watch news about inflation and interest rates, something much bigger is in motion. The US dollar, which for decades dominated global trade, is facing its biggest challenge since the end of the gold standard in 1971. Countries like China, Russia, Brazil, and even traditional U.S. allies are quietly creating alternatives to the SWIFT system and trading in local currencies. De-dollarization is no longer just talk from alternative economists. It's a concrete reality. China and Saudi Arabia are trading oil in yuan. India is buying Russian oil in rupees. The BRICS are developing a common currency. Each of these transactions removes a small percentage of the global demand for dollars. And when the demand for a currency falls, its value also falls. But this is rarely discussed in the mainstream media because the implications are frightening. Now, let's talk about something that directly affects you. The American middle class is disappearing. Not slowly, it's evaporating. The numbers are clear but rarely presented honestly. The cost of living has skyrocketed while wages have stagnated for decades when adjusted for real inflation. A house your parents bought with 3 years' salary now requires 8 or 10 years. College education that used to be affordable now leaves students indebted for decades. But here's what they don't want you to realize. This isn't accidental. It's the result of deliberate policies. Since the 1970s, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the working class to the top. Federal Reserve data shows that the wealthiest 1% of the U.S. now control more wealth than the entire middle class combined. Let that process for a moment. A tiny fraction of the population owns more than over 60% of Americans combined. How did this happen? Through a combination of fiscal policies that favor the rich, financial deregulation, globalization that exported well-paying jobs, and a credit system that keeps people trapped in perpetual debt. The average American works longer hours than ever before, is more productive than any previous generation, but sees less return for their labor. And there's more: the healthcare system. The United States spends more on healthcare per capita than any developed country, but has some of the worst outcomes. People are literally dying because they can't afford insulin, a drug discovered over 100 years ago. But this narrative is carefully managed because trillions of dollars are at stake. Insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and hospitals profit enormously from the current system. Any real attempt at reform is blocked by powerful lobbies. Let's talk about something even more fundamental: freedom of information. Do you think you have free access to information? Think again. Algorithms determine what you see on social media. Search engines decide which results appear first. Media conglomerates controlled by a handful of corporations define what is news. You're not getting the whole truth. You're getting a carefully curated version of reality. Modern censorship isn't as obvious as burning books. It's subtle. It's shadow banning, demonetization, selective fact-checking, and algorithmic manipulation. Dissenting voices aren't silenced outright. They're simply not amplified. You can speak, but no one will listen, and most people don't even realize it's happening. Here's a fact that should alarm everyone. Just 6 corporations control approximately 90% of American media. 6. That means what you see on TV, read in newspapers, and consume online is filtered through an extremely small number of corporate gatekeepers. They decide which stories matter, which perspectives are valid, and which narratives dominate public discourse.